pour l'éternité. On a donc perdu, tout perdu. Anissa et Kani ne vivent donc plus. Mes amis, ça fait donc très mal. Alors, des révélations ce jour. Bienvenue au 20e.
Nous sommes avec vous, madame et monsieur. Rebonsoir à tous et bienvenue pour cette
3, 2, 1, go!
Ok, c'est bon. Bon!
A number of people who are killed, which in this case is quite significant. So this is not simply a matter of general criminality like in other contexts. There are religious and other motivations in the context of the killings that are happening, the groups that are behind it, and ultimately the complicity of the government of Nigeria as well in terms of the insecurity in the country.
Yeah, when you mention Boko Haram, ISWAP, ISIS, what comes to mind is terrorism. How could terrorism be linked to genocide? These are therefore terrorists who are committing terrorist acts, and then you refer to it as a genocide against Christians. That doesn't seem to match with my understanding.
I think
of
you
the
bring up a very good point. I think part of the problem is that the Nigerian government is not an innocent bystander in this. If it were, then maybe a term other than genocide would be used. But the problem is that the government of Nigeria is complicit in what is happening, and you have elements of the government of Nigeria that are tied to these terrorist groups. So if we look at the current government of Nigeria, the vice president of the country currently, Shettima, has deep ties to Boko Haram. Some have called him the co-founder of Boko Haram. But regardless, everyone, and this is a public fact in Nigeria, he has deep ties to this terrorist group. There are photos that are available. Politicians in Nigeria have talked about this. What I'm saying is not a speculation. It's an established fact in terms of his ties. You have elements of the Nigerian military that also have ties to the same terrorist groups. And there have been famous instances of this. For example, back in 2014, there were plans between the U.S. and the Nigerians to rescue the Chibok schoolgirls. And one of the plans was foiled because elements of the Nigerian military leaked the planned operations to the terrorist groups. So the reason why the term genocide, or you've also heard the term Christian persecution, is being used is that you also have complicity of elements. I'm not saying the entire Nigerian government, but at least elements of the Nigerian government that are sympathetic to these same terrorist groups or who have relations with the same terrorist groups. And I think that's a fundamental part of the problem. And in a way, it's almost, to use an American phrase, asking the wolf to guard the sheep, or to ask the fox to guard the henhouse. Because how could we hope that a government could effectively fight the same terrorist groups in which some extremely senior members of that government have relations with those groups? And again, even politicians in Nigeria have openly talked about, we have this dangerous situation in which elements of our own government are tied to terrorist groups. So this is not just Elias's opinion. So
Let's look at it this way. The United States has legal instruments like the Magnitsky Act and other sanctions that they could apply to the individuals you have identified and mentioned, if at all they are guilty of what you are mentioning. Why doesn't the Nigerian government or the United States government use those tools at their disposal to target the individuals they know are directly linked to Boko Haram, instead of categorizing a whole nation as suffering from genocide, understanding that maybe the vice president, as you say, is part of it, but then the president himself, who is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, is not part of it. Is that not a mistake on the side of the United States?
I don't think it's a mistake, and also I don't think these things are mutually exclusive. So you talk about targeted sanctions. That's the next step. President Trump has designated Nigeria as a country of particular concern, which is an appropriate designation. Given their poor record on religious freedom, but additional steps need to be made. Simply designating the Nigerian government as a country of particular concern is not sufficient. There have been talks and efforts in the U.S. Congress to go further than what the president has done and to start engaging in targeted sanctions on specific Nigerian officials. And Magnitsky sanctions are an enormously effective tool to be used as almost a surgical knife to identify specific wrongdoers who are engaging in bad acts and are of a malignant influence. I fully support Magnitsky sanctions. Currently in the U.S. government, people like Senator Ted Cruz, who we've met with, has publicly talked about how he knows who the guilty parties are. There are lists that are being considered now in Washington. Names are being discussed. These things aren't overnight. They take time. I will anticipate over the coming months that there will be a push for certain Nigerian officials to be sanctioned under the Magnitsky Act that you referenced. So, you actually mentioned something that we completely agree with, and I think you'll see as one of the next steps. And the great thing about the Magnitsky Act is, again, these are targeted sanctions that specifically go after the wrongdoers, rather than having something that's just generalized. So, targeted sanctions are effective. And those actions will be pursued.
I understand that is just a first step, and there could be second steps or third steps. But President Trump was very emphatic about using military attacks, and he already told Secretary Hegseth to prepare to attack Nigeria, meaning he understands, or they already know where the terrorists are, and they could just go there and obliterate them, as he did with the nuclear arsenals in Iran. So why take all these steps if he already knows that is where the problem is and the terrorists could be obliterated?
Right. Those are two things, right? One is a symptom of the problem, which can be addressed through military action, right? Eliminating specific terrorists. But the problem will continue if the government of Nigeria continues to have politicians that have relations with these terrorists that covertly support these terrorist groups. So there can be operations that are done to eliminate terrorist cells and terrorist operators in Nigeria, but ultimately we also need to engage on it using the diplomatic tools. It's not enough to use military tools. You have to use diplomatic tools in order to...
But you use military tools after diplomatic tools have failed. But President Trump started with military tools.
Well, as you can see, we haven't engaged. The U.S. government yet is considering its options, right? There haven't been military operations, full-scale military operations yet. And the President Trump has a very unique style, if you will, in terms of dealing. That's very unique, right, amongst the presidents that we've had. And I think that in dealing with a country like Nigeria, where people have for years been complaining about these issues, and the government of Nigeria has refused to listen to the suffering of its own people, I think, frankly, a straightforward style of the president is what's needed in order to show the government of Nigeria that we're serious and that they can't continue with what they've been doing. And you can see that the president's style has caused the Nigerian government to have a reaction, whereas for years they've just been completely blasé. And a lot of my friends in Africa very much like the president's straightforward, no-nonsense style. And I think when you're dealing with a country like Nigeria or some of these other countries where you have bad governments, diplomatic whispers often don't move the needle. You need to be a little bit more aggressive. So I think it's part of the president's diplomatic style of carrying a big stick. And I think sometimes that's what's needed. And I think it's been effective in this case.
I think President Trump's direct style, where he breaches diplomatic protocols, is one of the strategies that he uses to get things going and resolving problems around the world. But let's come back to talk about the funders of the Boko Haram. You have been emphatic that military officers in Nigeria and politicians are part of that movement. But we have on record on the floor of Congress a congressman reading an audit of USAID, and in it he claims that the USAID has been sponsoring Boko Haram. So why is President Trump putting the responsibility on Nigerians and Nigerian leaders while there is evidence from the United States side, read by a congressman on the floor of Congress, that the USAID has been participating in this? Why is the responsibility falling only on Nigerians now?
Well, the responsibilities, as discussed, are falling not on Nigerians, not the Nigerian people, but these horrible, horrific Nigerian politicians. And I want
but
to
on the United States side, there seems to have been action sponsoring that too.
Yeah, well, and you see what President Trump did on that front. President Trump has shut down USAID and has folded USAID into the State Department, and a lot of ineffective programs were eliminated. Again, I try to work to influence U.S. policy in directions in which I think they are the right directions. That doesn't mean that everything the U.S. government has done has been correct. Sometimes mistakes have been made, and I think the president made the right choice in terms of deciding to make reforms within our administrative state. So again, the same USAID that you're mentioning that the congressman talked about is the same USAID that the president has shut down, and it's now been folded in the State Department. Programs like those programs have been closed, and there have been other programs too that have made absolutely no sense whatsoever. We've unfortunately, USAID, which had started with good intentions, had a variety of programs that just didn't make any sense, that were a waste of taxpayer money, sometimes even working against our interests. So I think that that's a perfect example in terms of why there have been reforms, but nonetheless, the primary responsibility is for the problems in Nigeria is the government of Nigeria.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make a clarification here. You don't work for the State Department, so what you are saying is just your understanding of how the State Department and the government of the United States is operating, and the processes, how you read them from outside. Am I being right?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm a lobbyist, government relations consultant here in Washington, D.C., so I'm not an employee or representative of the U.S. government. That being said, I work closely with all the parts of the U.S. government, including our Congress, State Department, White House, National Security Council, and other agencies. So I'm not a representative of the State Department. I'm not a formal representative of the U.S. government, but these are all officials whom I talk to, who I work closely with, who I try to bring my information to and my perspective to. So I hope that provides a clarification.
Thank you so much. Let's go back to talk about the categorization of the genocide. In his testimony to the Subcommittee on Africa in Congress recently, Ambassador Jonathan Pratt said, in northern Nigeria, Christians live under constant threat from these terrorist organizations, compounding this unacceptable level of violence against vulnerable Christian communities. Nigeria continues to prosecute blasphemy cases, which my colleague will discuss in more detail. This claim of genocide against Christians and Christian persecution, is that based on what is happening to Christians only in the north of Nigeria or everywhere across Nigeria?
Yeah, this is a broader issue, and let's bring this beyond the issue of simply terrorism. I think some context is needed here. Nigeria is almost evenly split between Christian and Muslim for a period of a few decades. There was an attempt to have a balance of power in the country where there was, you could say, an informal understanding that there should be a rotation between Christian and Muslim presidents and vice presidents, and that the government should be secular. And there was a very fragile balance of power. And that balance of power was upset 2015 with the rise to power of the former military dictator of Nigeria, Buhari, as president. And he began the process of introducing Islamic fundamentalism into the government, engaging, that's when you started to have the increased persecution of the Biafrans and the Biafran independence movement. You start to have policies about reintegration of quote-unquote repentant terrorists into the Nigerian military. And this process of fundamentalism coming into the government has continued, whereupon now in the current government, I talked about Shettima, but you have in both President Tinubu and Shettima for really the first time a Muslim ticket, where you don't have Christians in either the presidency or the vice presidency. You also have the spread of Sharia law in the north of the country, and now there are attempts to bring that southwards. So, for example, there have been attempts to now introduce Sharia law into parts of the southwest of the country, what we call Yoruba land, for example, right? And the Yorubas tend to be more religiously moderate, but now they're trying to bring Sharia law into the middle belt, even south into the country. Some of these radical politicians are trying to make these sorts of proposals. You also have, again, the terrorists, Fulani herders coming from the north into the middle belt, and even now parts of both the southwest and the southeast, what we call Biafra land. So there's considerable concern by many elements of the country, actually, that you have basically a fundamentalist capture of the key institutions of government in the government and the military. And it's something that is deeply concerning to people. So I think that's a very important factor as well. That's also, of course, connected to this issue of terrorism as well. So that's just another factor that is deeply concerning, I think, to both Biafrans and Nigerians generally, as well as to the U.S. government, frankly.
I get you very well. What difference do you make between the Fulani herders and the Boko Haram terrorists? Because when I listen to you, it looks like the two are the same.
No, I didn't say the two are the same. I'm saying there have been issues by those groups and other groups in terms of murders of innocent civilians, and the situation has gone completely out of hand in the country. So I did not, I didn't say all these groups are the same. They have different nuances, but they all contribute to the problem.
So at what time, I am asking these questions because I understand that your work informs the United States government on what is happening in Nigeria. So at what point do you make a difference between a Fulani herder attack on farmers and a Boko Haram attack on farmers or on Christians? How do you make that difference?
I'm not sure if I really understand the question. I think it's almost, splitting hairs in terms of if the government of Nigeria is not only not protecting the country, but you have politicians that are tied to radical groups that are killing innocent civilians, whether or not an innocent person's murdered by Fulani herders or by Boko Haram. I think it's a problem either way. So I'm not sure if I understand what kind of distinction.
I get the point where you are making the argument that it doesn't matter whether it is called a genocide or it's called Christian persecution. What matters is insecurity, and the government of Nigeria is not performing its role.
And that's where many people are offended by the government of Nigeria, because they try and engage in semantics in terms of it's not Christian genocide, and that's not the technical term, and there is no genocide, and maybe use this other term. And even if you see the reactions, forget about the US government, if you see the reactions of many Nigerians, they themselves get furious when they see these Nigerian media spokespeople trying to, split hairs over definitions and terms. And you'll hear many regular, not just Biafrans, but Nigerians generally, say, hey, listen, the country's a disaster. We're moving towards a failed state. We have problems. People are being killed, and yet you're trying to, make a debate over terminology. So, I think this is something where, even people in Nigeria are very, very upset, and they want their own government to be held accountable for what's happening.
Okay, so I'm happy with that clarification. So at this point, from your understanding of what the United States Congress and White House and a State Department are thinking, what would be a solution that the United States would say, okay, the Nigerian government is doing everything now to protect Christians? What is going to happen for them to say that is happening?
Yeah, I think when you're dealing again with the country in Nigeria, with the types of people that are running the government, the best tool to use is really sanctions, including targeted sanctions. When these corrupt Nigerian politicians, for example, are no longer able to, let's say, launder their money in the US and other places, if, let's say, their assets are seized, because also many of these officials are completely corrupt in outrageous ways. And there have been a number of stories about the corruption of Nigerian officials. So if we were to go after officials who are complicit, who are part of the problem, sanctioning them and holding them accountable, I think that would be the best way to change their behavior. Simply trying to nicely ask the Nigerian government officials, oh, please do something. People have been asking the Nigerian government to do something for years. Clearly, they've not cared to do anything, and the problem's only gotten worse. So I think when you're dealing with a conundrum like Nigeria or any other, and these other governments too, I think, a tough approach is what's needed, frankly. And the same goes to, for other governments in Africa as well, where, let's say, and especially with more autocratic regimes. But, that's a separate discussion.
Yes, we're going to talk about that in a moment. I want us to switch gears now and talk about Biafra. So we'll definitely talk about autocratic governments like the government of Cameroon when we talk about Biafra in this case. In an article by the Africa Report, they say former US Congressman Jim Moran, who lent a voice to the indigenous people of Biafra movement in 2024, the situation in Nigeria reflects human rights abuses, religious freedom issues, persecution of Christians, increasing Islamic fundamentalism with the Nigerian government and its alignment with US adversaries. But in his statement, Ambassador Jonathan Pratt says, Nigeria is one of the United States' key allies in Africa. Is your firm having this thing wrong?
No, I think not at all. I think one thing to clarify is the U.S. government is a very complex machinery. It works in a very unique way. On any particular issue, you'll have different parts of the U.S. government that may have different points of view, right? What matters is what's the overall political consensus among those who are the decision makers. In this case, when it comes to taking a strong stance against the government of Nigeria, you see extremely strong support in the United States Congress. I've worked with many of these members of Congress. That's now been reflected at the White House, in the National Security Council, and the President of the United States himself. And ultimately, in the nature of the current U.S. government, what really matters is the policy stance of President Trump. The viewpoint of the president is reflective in U.S. government policy. This is different than, let's say, other administrations where decisions are made at a more bureaucratic level through the interagency process. In this case, what the U.S. government policy is the viewpoint of President Trump. The State Department tends to be a little bit more, how shall we say, conservative and risk-averse usually. So that's why you have people like Ambassador Pratt making those comments, but that doesn't necessarily reflect the overall consensus and the viewpoint of the people or the decision makers. Mind you, before this whole topic took off the past 2-3 months in terms of Christian genocide and the stance of the President of the United States, you had people like Masad Boulos, who's another senior State Department official, who try to argue that the Christians aren't being targeted and that maybe more Muslims are being killed. Mr. Boulos has had a past history with Nigeria, given his background, and has friendly relations with the President of Nigeria. But then the President of the United States decided to take a different stance, given the mood in Congress and other parts of the government. I guess what I'm trying to say is the stance of the U.S. government is very clear through the opinion of the President of the United States. President Trump has even made comments saying Nigeria is a disgrace. So with due respect, what really matters is the viewpoint of President Trump, his influential people in the White House, and his allies in the U.S. Congress. And Ambassador Pratt, I think, is speaking a diplomatic terminology, but that's not really driving U.S. policy right now.
Yeah,
so I just want to give you that.
Yeah, that background was necessary. And somebody who's listening to us now, it's definitely asking, how did you get to President Trump's ears, whereas his own ambassador could not convince him on these issues?
Well, that's why lobbying is important here in Washington, D.C. It's to engage in an education campaign. For the past year, we've been very proactively lobbying members of the U.S. Congress, educating them on these issues, building alliances. And again, we can't take all the credit. You've also had some pro-Christian evangelical groups that were very active and also lobbying on behalf of similar issues, Christian persecution in Nigeria. And some of those groups we've allied and worked with and cooperated with in terms of our lobbying efforts. And because of the alliances we built in the U.S. Congress, and you had people like Senator Ted Cruz, who are extremely influential, who introduced legislation calling for sanctions on Nigeria, that penetrated into the White House, into places like the National Security Council, which is very influential in this particular White House, and eventually that percolated to the president, and the president decided to take action on the issue. So lobbying is systematic. You build alliances, and if you build enough alliances with influential members of Congress and other individuals who speak directly to the president, that can influence the viewpoint of the president of the United States. And also, too, I think this was very natural for the president because many of his supporters are people who are evangelicals or pro-Christian and so forth. So I think this was a very natural decision for him to make.
Am I understanding you very clear that in your lobbying and advocacy, you have decided to use Christians in place of Biafra in order to catch President Trump's attention?
Well, I won't say in place, but rather in connection with, because again, the Biafra issues both has ethnic undertones, but also it's a religious. There are religious connotations to it as well, because the Biafrans are predominantly Christian, and so we have advanced the Biafra issue in conjunction with the issue of Christian persecution in Nigeria. Because those are connected issues and related issues. It's just the Biafra issue also has some specific nuances to it beyond also the Christian issue as well.
So you're saying that you added Biafra and Christian advocacy to catch President Trump's attention. Am I getting that clear?
That's correct. And again, those are related issues. It's just that the Biafra matter also has some additional elements and nuances to it.
What are those additional elements and nuances?
Well, when it comes to the persecution the Biafrans have faced, part of it, there is a religious element to it because the Biafrans are a significant bulk of the Christian population of the country. But there's also an ethnic element because Biafrans, one of the major tribes in Biafra land are the Igbo people who've suffered significant persecution in Nigeria and in the 1960s. Of course, you're aware that there was a civil war where the Biafrans tried to establish their independence, and they had their own state for 3 years, recognized by some countries. Unfortunately, they were re-annexed by Nigeria, and unfortunately, they were never really fully accepted back into society. They face discrimination and marginalization since the end of the Civil War. They haven't been able to get, for example, the Nigerian presidency, and there's, for example, a lot of that part of the country, southeast Nigeria, the Nigerian government has purposely neglected to invest in that area, develop the infrastructure of that area. You have Port Harcourt, for example, that's still been completely undeveloped. This is all intentional to punish the people of what we call the southeast Nigeria or Biafra. So there's been very unnecessary persecution and marginalization, which has only gotten worse with the recent governments in Nigeria, and this is something that needs to be
I hear all those points, but one point came to mind, or one point struck me more. Did you say Nigeria re-annexed Biafra?
What I was trying to get at is, after the Biafrans declared independence in 1967, there's a 3-year civil war, and then Nigeria unfortunately won the civil war. That's what I was trying to convey.
Okay, so Nigeria won the civil war, and Biafra became reintegrated into. And
that's what I was saying. Yes.
So what is the basis for the Biafran movement of independence right now? Is it a historical base or an economic?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think a fundamental part of the problem is Nigeria is really an artificial amalgamation of the British, where they put together disparate peoples under colonial borders in 1914. You have the Biafrans in the southeast, you have the Yorubas in the southwest, and then you have the Hausas and Fulanis in the north. Unfortunately, the British played some games where they favored politicians in the north, which they felt could be more easily controlled, and empowered the northern politicians for political power in Nigeria, even though you have the human capital and the economic resource space in the south of the country. The Biafrans or Igbo people are incredibly educated, entrepreneurial, and also the Yorubas in the southwest. You have Lagos. They're also very educated. A lot of the Nigerian professors that you see are of Yoruba background, for example. And also that's where you have considerable natural resources, and let's say in the Biafra territory in terms of oil and gas and so forth, which unfortunately they don't get the benefit of that. So the country was put together. And again, when there was an attempt of having a balance of power between Christian and Muslim presidents and vice presidents, the country was kind of barely holding together in this dysfunctional way. But now that the balance has been upset, the country's totally spiraling into a failed state, because ultimately you have different competing value systems within the same country. You have parts of the north, again, that are under Sharia law. You have, again, the Biafrans who are completely different in terms of being westward oriented, Christian, highly educated population. So the whole system is disintegrating. And we've seen this in this happen in other cases, in other contexts, like, for example, the breakup of Yugoslavia and so forth. So, unfortunately, we're at a situation now where, given just how dysfunctional the country is, other options have to be considered. And what I'm talking about is not radical. Many people throughout Nigeria have talked about we have to really reconsider this whole arrangement. Even people in the Southwest, the Yorubas, some of them have called for their independence because they're just concerned that the whole system is becoming dysfunctional and collapsing. So given the state of that country and just how dysfunctional it is and how the system is at odds with itself, I think a lot of people are saying, okay, this is the time to sit back and potentially rethink how Nigeria should work and if parts of the country should have, let's say, greater autonomy or even their own independence. So this is not a radical point of view, and this is not just a perspective of the Biafrans. Different people in different parts of what we call Nigeria are seriously reconsidering this entire arrangement.
So based on these factors you have just outlined, what is your client's final objective? Is it independence or greater autonomy within Nigeria?
Yeah, so the eventual goal is independence. But that being said, the Biafra government also is very sophisticated. They understand how international diplomacy is. That's why they're working closely through me with the U.S. government, and we're working on seeing how we can achieve the goal, because it's going to take some time, and there going to have to be transitionary processes as well as we work towards the eventual goal of independence. The creation of entities that are autonomous or newly independent states. These are things that take time, and it's something we want to be very thoughtful about. So the Biafra government, through my efforts here, is having close dialogue with the U.S. government. And this is a process that we're working on, but it's going to take time. And we're making sure that we're working with the U.S. and other necessary stakeholders to work towards the eventual goal.
Let's talk again about the religious persecution and genocide as it's being presented. The Nigerian government has refused those claims and said they are gross misrepresentation of the reality. But when President Trump made his statement, supposedly Biafran diaspora was celebrating and jubilating. Do you think the Biafran diaspora is considering this as a win for their advocacy?
The president's actions are absolutely a win. And again, what the government of Nigeria is talking about is just complete nonsense. I mean, we see this recently in the life sentence of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, who's a prominent Biafran activist that was illegally kidnapped by the government of Nigeria in 2021 from Kenya. He's the Nelson Mandela of our time. He's been a peaceful activist for an independent Biafra. The government of Nigeria kidnaps that gentleman, drags out his trial for years, gives him a life sentence. Meanwhile, you have the president of Nigeria pardoning drug traffickers, murderers, and convicted Islamic terrorists. So a lot of not just Biafrans, but even other Nigerians, when they look at what's happening, they say, "Hey, how come the Nigerian government, in the case of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, is giving him life sentence through this clearly politically motivated court case, and meanwhile the president of Nigeria is pardoning criminals, drug traffickers, and former terrorists?" So it's just when you have contrasts that are so stark, one can't help but come to the conclusion that there's a bias against both Biafrans and also Christians generally in Nigeria, because what else could possibly explain these type of discrepancies?
So you're saying that,
and this is not just my view too. Recently, congressional hearing that you alluded to, a member of Congress, John James, highlighted the example of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu as a double standard Nigerian government example of Christian persecution in Nigeria. So again, this is not just my point of view, but the point of view of people in the U.S. government and point of view of people in Nigeria, both Biafrans and non-Biafrans. A lot of Nigerians, again, non-Biafrans, think that the Nigerian government's prosecution and life sentence of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is completely ridiculous and absurd.
yeah, I don't want to adjudicate.
Again, that's just one example to show you why what the Nigerian government says is just absurd.
That's right. I don't want to adjudicate those issues because we could have a different conversation on the judgment itself that was delivered 100 and something pages, but we could have a separate conversation on that one.
But that's just to answer your question, though.
Yeah, what I want to touch, do you believe that Nnamdi Kanu did not commit any crime, or are you saying that the sanction was more than the crime he committed?
He did not commit any crime. He was agitating for the independence of Biafra. He had an organization, the Indigenous People of Biafra. He was a peaceful activist, and the government of Nigeria has not presented any convincing evidence regarding any crimes that he committed. It seems that from the perspective of the government of Nigeria, simply having the viewpoint of supporting Biafran independence is a crime in and of itself. And I think that's just, again, completely absurd. People should have the right to free speech and the right to have different political viewpoints.
So what is the main leverage right now that the Biafran movement has as compared to the Republic of Nigeria, to the Federal Republic of Nigeria? Because the Biafran movement is actually advocating for independence, as you said, but at this material moment, it looks like President Trump is rather focused on bringing in sanity as regards Christians. So what leverage does the Biafran movement have to press the right buttons?
While we have a lot of support here in Washington, D.C., again, there's certain things I can't go to due to their sensitivities, but we've met with senior people in Congress and the White House and other places as well. I think given the acknowledgement of the poor treatment of Christians in Nigeria, right, that there's a greater sympathy or openness towards having a separate Christian state in the south of the country, and in this case, Biafra. And the Biafrans, and I'll speak generally again because I can't go into private conversations, have a lot to offer the United States. The Biafrans have, as I'll talk about what's been mentioned in press reports, have offered military bases to the United States in the Gulf of Guinea. There are immense oil and gas deposits in Biafra. That's actually majority of Nigeria's oil and gas. The Biafrans will be more than happy to renegotiate more favorable contracts with U.S. oil and gas companies, cooperation with the U.S. government on counterterrorism, and other benefits. And the U.S. government is very much interested in having greater presence in West Africa. There have been a number of coups in the Sahel, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso. We've lost some of our military installations and bases in those countries. There's an interest in having alternative allies in West Africa to make up for those losses so we can maintain a presence. And Biafra offers an ideal place for the U.S. to have presence in the Gulf of Guinea. And unfortunately, because the Nigerian government has just proven to be so problematic, and there have been efforts over the years to try to work with the government of Nigeria, and it's just been not very fruitful. There's an openness now to alternative allies. I'll give you another analogy in a different part of the continent. We have in East Africa, Somalia, which has been a failed state for a long time. You have the separate de facto state of Somaliland, which is self-governing, but they're not recognized yet by the U.S. or the international community as an independent country. That being said, because Somaliland is developing good relations with the U.S., they've made open offers to the United States in terms of bases, port deals, natural resource deals. You've had key people in the U.S. government, especially in the U.S. Congress, advocating for the recognition of the independence of Somaliland. President Trump has talked about him looking at Somaliland, and I think it's very likely that the U.S. government will make a deal and recognize the independence of Somaliland sometime during President Trump's term. So there is currently, with the existing administration and Congress, an openness to engage in deal making in Africa, which presents an opportunity for, again, depending on the right circumstances, independence movements in Africa, depending on, again, the circumstances and what they're willing to offer the United States.
Yeah. So why do these deals leave African states their sovereignty and the economic development? Because through independence, from independence till today, we've seen African states losing all their natural resources and their wealth generation to superpowers. And it sounds like these countries are offering all this to the United States to come continue the journey. So where do we stand? Look at Niger. All the uranium is gone, but there is no electricity in Niger. Nigeria, the oil and gas is all gone, but there is no consequential development. And then what I'm hearing from you is that is going to continue with the United States?
No, that's not what I'm saying. You make a good point in terms of, I think a lot of Africans have been exploited by what we could call neocolonialism, where even after, let's say, countries become quote-unquote independent, they're still under undue influence by former colonial powers. I think one of the most controversial being France. And oftentimes the issue with some of the former European colonists, whether it's the French or the Belgium or some of these other powers, is they do business with their former colonies in a way that's exploitative, oftentimes trying to prop up puppet dictators, engaging in economic deals that are bad for those countries that are exploitative. That's not what I'm advocating for, and that is not what the U.S. is advocating for. In fact, I think a greater U.S. presence can offer an alternative for African governments to both kind of these neo-colonialist former powers, as well as an alternative to both the Russians and Chinese. And the way that the U.S. is, it's not this exploitative colonial model, but rather a business style model in which the U.S. can come and say, hey, how can we help make investments in your country such that we could both deepen our relations and we could both make money and prosper together. So the viewpoint is not in exploiting the countries or its natural resources, but rather having investments in these countries in which both the U.S. and those countries, whether it's the Biafrans or other places in Africa, where there can be a mutually benefit, where it could be a win-win situation. So yeah, I want to say,
the problem is when I listen to you talk, you say the Nigerians or the Biafrans and the Somalis and the Somalilanders are willing to offer the oil and gas, natural resources and ports for the U.S. to come in. But I didn't hear the other part where they are coming to invest in those countries so they can generate the wealth within those countries and create
that's exactly
jobs.
What I'm saying. For where the U.S. can come in, but to make investments to help the Biafrans or let's say help Somaliland take advantage of their natural resources in such a way that the U.S. benefits, but those countries also benefit. And that's a much better model in terms of, let's say, what the Biafrans currently have, where their oil and gas are exploited by both these companies as well as the government of Nigeria, and none of the benefits of that wealth benefits the people of the area. So, we have I think we can have a situation where Biafra, that can determine its own destiny, can have friendships with countries like the United States that can make investments, right, in its oil and gas industries and other industries where the people of Biafra can finally benefit from their own wealth, their own natural resources. Of course, it'll be of a benefit to the United States as well. So it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, so far, what is the blueprint from the Biafran side that they're offering to the United States? Because, as you say, I understand President Trump's foreign policy is driven by national security and investment, which he considers to be economic security, both for the United States and for the foreign countries. But at this point, what is the kind of blueprint, if it is not confidential? Tell us, what is the blueprint that Biafra is offering? Do they already have some numbers? Do they have what they're looking at and saying, okay, if we do this, Trump comes in and offers this, then our country is going to benefit by this? If not, wouldn't they be falling back into the situation that we find in Nigeria today?
Yeah, so we do have a blueprint. I'm just telling you the generalities of the blueprint, right? In terms of the areas in which we're already having discussions with the U.S. in terms of the oil and gas investments, U.S.-Biafra defense relations, and in terms of potential bases and also counterterrorism cooperation and other areas. So I could speak generally in terms of this is what we're offering. There are some more specific things, but again, I can't go into those particular details due to sensitivities, but I'm just telling you what the general items are, which some of this is in the news and public reports. We are having some more specific conversations. I can't go into those specifics.
All right. So what is the advantage of having a lobbyist in DC instead of doing or talking to these people yourselves? Because the senators, their doors are open to the public, open to their constituents. They listen to their constituents and receive them. Why should someone be hiring you to go talk on his behalf?
Yeah, so the way I would explain lobbying is similar to how you have a professional attorney that you hire to navigate you through the political process, through the legal process. You hire a lobbyist to help you navigate through the political process. And I think there's a term in law that any client who tries to represent themselves in court is foolish, right? There's this phrase for attorneys. And I know you have a legal background yourself. So someone can represent themselves, let's say, in court or at trial, but they're better off having a professional attorney helping them through that process. The same thing goes for the political process, where the U.S. government is extraordinarily complicated to navigate, and people like myself have the knowledge and expertise as to how to navigate the U.S. government, and we provide advice and counsel to our clients in terms of how to best navigate through the U.S. government, who are the right people to meet with, and also how the information should be conveyed and what the message should be. So we act similar in a very similar way as attorneys do. And also people like myself, we have established relations with members of Congress. So a lot of members of Congress are people in the U.S. government. They know me. There's a certain comfort. There's a certain understanding that if I'm to introduce someone, let's say to a member of Congress, that person is vetted, that the cause that I'm representing is legitimate because I have these relations and I'm established here in Washington, D.C. So it produces a certain comfort to be introduced by a party that's known by both sides versus, let's say, someone approaches a member of Congress who they don't know who that person is, right? And the same thing applies to life in general. More comfortable when you're introduced to someone else by someone who you already know, who you have friendly relations with, who you trust. So I have established relations with members of Congress and other people in the U.S. government. They know me, they know my expertise, and that allows me to be essentially a facilitator between myself and these worthy causes. So I hope that gives some perspective.
It does give the perspective, and but it's expensive to hire a lobbyist to do this work in DC on your behalf, not being sure of the outcome.
It's an investment that I think should be viewed as a political investment, and it's something that's very effective. That's why so many countries and international causes hire lobbyists. And I think given the results that we've achieved, and this is not just me saying it, senior officials in the government of Nigeria have openly attacked me and have blamed my lobbying and so forth. So even the Nigerian government itself, you could say, has acknowledged the effectiveness of my lobbying, although they're not happy about it, whereas my client is happy about it. So I think clients can decide the effectiveness of the services given the results. In this case, we've achieved, I think, significant results. And in fact, there's even a tweet, I forget by who, but there's a tweet online that went viral, 500,000 tweets, saying, the lobbying campaign that our firm engaged on behalf of the Biafrans was one of the best returns on investment in history, which I think was a little bit flowery. But, clients can judge, and people can generally judge in terms of whether or not a lobbyist is achieving results and influencing opinion or not.
So Biafrans are already happy while they have not yet had their independence? You say, is that what you're telling me?
Well, Biafrans are happy about the results we're achieving, but we're still working towards the goal. Achieving a newly independent state in Africa or anywhere takes time. We've engaged in our lobbying campaign. I've been involved in
Nous sommes déjà presque arrivés à la fin de cette édition spéciale, l'une des chaînes sociopolitiques. Alors, bienvenue donc pour la prochaine. Bam!